Hey everyone, how are you? My name is Blair Sinta. Welcome to the podcast. This is Recording Drums with Blair Sinta. Today, my guest is Mario Calire. You may know Mario from back in the heyday of the band The Wallflowers in the 90s. He was a member of that band back then. He's also toured extensively with Ozomatli, Liz Phair. Lately, he's been playing on a lot of projects for the composer Lyle Workman. And we had a really fun conversation. We're similar in life, where we are both parents to two children, and we spend a lot of time working at home and recording. So a lot of similarities there. He's a really funny guy. He really tells it like it is. He's got a pretty great online presence, through his Instagram, kind of poking fun at some of the how social media works with drummers and things like that. But he's a fantastic drummer. He's a really great recording and live musician. Just a great musician. Super cool guy. So, today Mario Calire. And if you enjoy the podcast or if you enjoy what I do, please check out my courses available on my website. Introduction to Recording, all about getting your foot in the door on recording drums and improve your groove. If you're looking for lessons on just, working on groove, time, feel, things like that, things that are important to me, and it's definitely important to drumming itself. All right. I also have a free PDF that tells you all about my go-to gear in my studio. That is available in my link in my bio, right on the front page of my website. If you're on YouTube, please comment. Please give it a thumbs up. Please share it. If you're on Instagram and you know people that might dig this podcast, please give it a shout out. And that's it. All right, Mario Calire, dropping some humor and some really good knowledge. Let's go. We're not going to do niceties or anything, man, like that. We're just going to nerd right from the beginning.
Yeah, I was about to start asking you questions, and that's the whole point of this. If we're not recording it, then what are we doing? We would have got all the stuff out of the way, and then, now let's talk.
Life doesn't exist unless you're recording it.
It doesn't count.
Yeah. I should probably put my red headphones on so we can just
my God,
represent, right?
I think these are actually a little too isolated. It's like you're kind of for talking. For playing, it's cool.
You can't even hear yourself.
Yeah. Speaking of these, you use these same ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had an interesting, and you probably already know this, but I had an interesting conversation with Gordy, the guy who makes them.
Yeah.
And he was telling me something that, they got the Sony drivers in them, which the 7506s, which are pretty bright.
Okay.
But he said that when you put any speaker in this kind of closed, you take a speaker that's designed for a certain, like your headphones there, you put it in a different enclosure.
Yep.
It totally changes how they respond.
Ah.
And they're already kind of bright, but this makes them really bright. So with the trick for me that I've had to figure out is I've been making my stuff not bright enough.
Okay.
Get it? Because it's these are overrepresenting high end.
Okay, that's really weird to me, dude, because mine are not bright.
Okay, well, they should be. Have you had them for a long time?
Yeah.
You probably need new drivers because they go. He also said having drivers in this place where there's no air to escape is really hard on drivers. I have two pairs, and I send one back to him just about every year for either new cushions.
Yeah.
If they're starting to get uncomfortable on your head, dude, just send it to them.
You just beat me to the punch because I was going to say I need to get his info because my cushions are bad now.
Oh, dude, it's the worst. Yeah.
Actually, one of the things, it's really funny that you say that because one of the things because people ask me about those headphones all the time.
Yeah.
And I say that one of the reasons I love them is that they're not bright and they don't get in my ears.
Okay, well, maybe
I can wear them all day long and I don't get tired.
Yeah. Interesting. So, do you feel like when you're getting sounds that that it's translating well to what you're actually doing? When you go back and listen to your studio monitors, is it similar?
So that's where it differs. I don't rely on them to get sounds at all.
Well, what do you do?
I run back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's purely for tracking for me.
Sure.
So, and I use these for like if I want to monitor separately from my speakers.
Oh yeah, yeah. You wouldn't mix with these. These are not accurate. These are for just saving your hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Which is really important, but it isn't. This is like I was relying on them too much, and so I've had a few people say, "Hey, your stuff sounded killer, but I need to add 3, 4, 5K, a couple dBs across the board." I'm like, "Geez, I think my stuff sounds pretty right to me," and then I realized, oh yeah, if I just listen to my speakers, it's a different representation than when I'm tracking to. But I don't want to crank up high end on my EQs because these are bright. I'm already like hanging on to the hearing I got. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
you sit there with your headphones on and you tweak right from your seat right there.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see it. I'm on my big MacBook, but my rack, I can't move it.
Yeah.
But I can. Well, I don't know if you can see, but I'm not sitting at my kit. I have one chair over.
Okay.
So I have 2 chairs, and I can reach my kick pedal.
Amazing.
From here, so I can when I really want to like check EQ on my toms, I can do it while I'm like I love having my rack here. The disadvantage is that I know that like my monitors aren't really in an ideal situation. They're kind of tucked in, but I'm not a mixer. I'm tracking for people. So yes, I always wonder when I see people, how do you tweak when your shit is in another room? Like that would drive me nuts. Or you have to have somebody help you or how do you do it?
I have a little green guy that I live in the studio and I feed him. No. I've trained my cats to tweak the mic.
What do you do? Do you kind of have you found some tried and true stuff for like kick and snare and you sort of leave it with minor changes when you go back?
That's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
That's definitely part of it. Couple things. I mean, like that's the main thing. It's right. It's like visually, I know where things work for me.
Sure.
I mean, EQ wise too. And it's like, oh, this needs to be brighter. Or like my FET mic, I'm going to roll off like 3K, from 3K and just cut it out, right? Anything above, right? So that's just visual. Some things like my distressor, I will set a plugin.
Okay.
After I do a little play.
And then copy over.
And copy over to the
hardware. Yeah, that's smart.
So little things like that.
Yeah. And if you have like, any of the Neve simulations, if you have Neve-based EQs, then you can do the same thing. You could track flat with the EQ out. Yeah, that's smart.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I just love touching the knobs and being able to hear because I'll change. You know how it is. You change your kick, you change your snare, you change where your mic position or the mic itself or the pre.
Yeah.
You're trying to get a totally different sound, and to be able to go, okay, what's working or not. And I don't go crazy with it. I think I'm doing normal shit too.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of subject really fascinates me because we have a lot of peers and there's no one way to do this. As you know, I haven't listened to your podcast yet. Sorry, but I mean to. But I'm sure that you found.
I gotta go.
No, I'm sure like when you're talking to different guys, everybody's got a slightly different way to do it.
It's fascinating.
Yeah,
it's fascinating to me that like. So, I think the way I do it, running back and forth, I don't even think twice about it anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, is there a little more manual labor involved? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It probably takes me a little longer when I'm really trying to tweak something, but I don't think twice about like, oh, I got to play again. I got to run back and forth.
Sure.
But I'm sure that some people, like you're used to doing this, if you had to come in here and do what I do, it would probably drive you up the wall.
Yeah, I've gotten set in my ways a little bit. Yeah. Do you have, so you must have, like, do you run another monitor and a keyboard, or do you have an iPad to run your Pro Tools or whatever your DAW is?
I do screen sharing with once I get into doing takes.
Yeah.
I run my laptop with screen sharing.
Oh, so it's like running your computer.
It just mirrors, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have a big iMac that I'm talking to you on, which is just a couple feet from my computer. So while I'm playing, I can see all my landmarks. Like, oh, here comes that thing I need to catch. And you got the same thing, but I have it like pretty visual, So
funny.
now,
I was talking to Jake Reed the other day, and he was talking about that too. And I was like, I can see it through my window, but I don't rely on it.
Sure.
Sometimes, like, if I do have an engineer here and they're working, like, in fact, I was doing something yesterday, and like I could see the thing coming up because we were literally, it was like, hey, this is a 16 bar section at the end of the tune. And, or, we actually hadn't even listened to it properly and I could see the end coming, but then he scrolled down and I was like, no.
Yeah, I'm not seeing my stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny. I realize it spoils me. Like if I go into a regular quote unquote session,
Yeah.
there's the computer's way far away. And it's like, oh shit, I got to write a chart now.
I know, right?
I get so spoiled. Just like, okay, bridge. Here's that hold. I have my little cheat sheet. I'm playing like, oh yeah. It's so cake. Like,
you can make your markers when you listen to it, and that's kind of your chart, right?
Yeah, that's what I do. I listen to it down, and I go, maybe they gave me some notes. Most of the time, I'm not getting a full session, so I'm making my own. But sometimes I have some people who send me a whole Pro Tool session. Then you have all their, second verse, this and that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of spoils you. But yeah, I like being able to. I wish you could see it. I've got this. What I'm. All my stuff is on is an old school teacher's desk. Those old metal ones where there's two big file cabinets on the side.
Oh yeah.
Okay, now on the top, on the sides above the file drawers are these little slide out things like for writing.
Yes. Yep.
So I put my Bluetooth keyboard and mouse on that.
Okay.
I pull it out and it's right next to my kit. Then when I go to send tracks or edit or mix, I push that in and I'm right back at my desk. It just was a fluke. I bought this off Craigslist and I wasn't even thinking about using it that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got my tight little setup here. It works for me. I know there's a zillion ways to do it. Like sometimes I thought about buying like a fancy desk that's made for, studio work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what do I really want out of a desk? Like, this is fine.
Right.
I
also love the fact that you have your CD shelf right behind you just for like sonic.
Yeah. I don't like CDs, just diffusion. Yeah. I find that if I take some of the jazz section out, it really helps my low end. No, it's just, I know it's people trip out on it. I realize we grew up in the time we used to go buy CDs all the time.
Yeah.
And of course we stopped. So when I look at my CD collection, I still buy some here and there, but it's like a time capsule. My CD collection is, besides the stuff that's classic, it's like all the modern stuff like stops in the late 90s.
Right.
Or whenever I stopped buying CDs, early 2000s.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, there's some like random shit that it's kind of dated, but I can't bring myself to get rid of it. And interestingly, I have one of my kids has gotten way into CDs. Because, we're all about like, extinct formats.
Right.
Especially now, kids are into vinyl. That's become big, but she's gotten into CDs, so she's been coming in here and stealing my CDs.
How old is she?
I have a 12 and a 15. Two girls, yeah.
Okay. So the 15-year-old's into the CD?
No, the 12-year-old.
Really?
Yeah, and she's like getting into the 90s now. She was all in the 80s music, and now it's like taking Pixie CDs out of here. And
does she have a CD player in her room?
It's funny you said that. I bought one of those I found on Facebook Marketplace, those things that everybody had where it's like a tower with two satellites like Sony.
Yeah.
It was like $25 and it was awesome. It has a tape player. I'm like, the next thing you need to get into is tapes, kid. That's the real lost format.
It's funny because like I find that like just listening, I have to like really scan my brain. It's funny, I listened to the first two Fiona Apple records the other day.
Okay.
I've been driving a lot, and I was just like, what? Like, I was just going through like my CD catalog in my brain. Like, what in there have I not heard in a long time that I would like to kind of revisit?
Yeah.
Not only were they like amazing to listen to, and like especially with some retrospective thoughts.
Yeah.
But just the visual part of looking at things. You scan your CD shelf. Like, what do I feel like listening to? What do I own that I feel like listening to? And with digital music, you don't get that. You get the algorithm that says like, this is what you should check out. It's like, no, I don't want to listen to like that thing anymore. I want something that like I totally did not listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the physical formats are still cool. So yeah, I'm hanging on for dear life. And I've got my, it's hard to see, but I built shelves that hold my vinyl that lean on top of that cabinet. So it's kind of like all one world now. My my dad was in the band America. That's how I ended up in California because I was born in Buffalo, New York. My dad's a keyboard player.
Okay.
So in 1977 or so, we moved out here from New York. And he, at the time, was given like free reign on Atlantic Records' back catalog because he was in that band. So he said, they said, whatever you want. He just checked like all the Atlantic jazz.
Right.
So I've stole like most of my dad's records. He wasn't listening to them anymore.
I think you're making a mistake on your diffusion, though, by not having the records on the center shelf.
Oh, man, I know. Well, this gives me more depth in the room. So, yeah, I kind of lucked out here, Blair, because I've been in this place for 20 years. And when I first moved, I'm in a neighborhood with real tight neighbors.
Yeah.
And I had a studio designer guy. You know Butch Norton?
Mm-hmm. So
he had a guy help him like design his home studio at the time. And I said, I want to soundproof my garage so I can play. And he's like, I got a guy. And he sent me this guy who was this real eccentric genius, this guy named Ken Goras.
Okay.
And he came and designed the room. And he thinks like a recording guy.
Yeah.
And I, at the time in 1999, was just thinking like, I just need to be able to play.
Yeah.
And not drive everybody crazy. So
it was like as a practice space.
Yeah, and it was. Yeah. I didn't realize like how lucky I was that I picked that guy because he had this whole design. I have a room inside a room. Yeah. There's also window boxes, so there's 2 sets of windows. So I have natural light in here, which is really incredible.
Right.
So that was much later that I actually like started putting gear in here. I talked to you early on when I was first trying to figure out what I was doing.
Yeah,
and you were helpful
a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. Well, it's funny because I had a similar thing. My first house I bought in 2003, and my main motivation was I need a place to play because I had lived when I first moved to LA in '96. Like I had lived with roommates that tolerated me, and we also had bands, and we would play in there. But then I lived like in a guest house and I barely practiced drums for like a couple of years. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it got to the point where, I was on the road a lot, but I was like, man, when I come home, I want to play. I want to be able to play.
Yeah. And you want to be able to play when it strikes you, when the inspiration hits you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a great thing about having,
Yeah. And then it became a studio.
Yeah.
I mean, I was, I knew I wanted to be recording, but I never knew the depth of where it was going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you start to buy gear? Were you like?
I had actually bought a Digi 02, like when it came out, and I was messing around with that.
Yep.
But people weren't sending tracks to each other. Really, it wasn't like it became, it was kind of, right? So I was like, well, I was tinkering around, but I ended up getting in, I kept getting on road gigs.
Yeah.
And I was in a band, Ozomatli, that kept me, they were doing just a brutal touring schedule.
Right.
And it wasn't until I got off the road in 2013 that I was like, okay, if I'm going to be home, I got to be able to record from home.
Yeah.
And that's when I started like very humbly building a rig. And that's when I first hit you up and I was like, hey, is this okay? You're like, yeah, it sounds like drums. You were probably being generous. But we both probably come a long way since then.
I remember that. No, I wasn't being generous.
No, you were cool though, because you were ahead of me. You had been at it for a while at that point. And I had bought like, even for 2013 standards, I bought like a Jurassic rig. I had a G5 with a PCI card going into some kind of Apogee converter. And I was running like Pro Tools 7, which was even dated for then.
Right.
And I bought some Presonus Pre's. Like I built my whole rig for like, I don't know, $800 or $900. Like It was nothing.
Right.
And I had some mics, a few, just that I had collected, nothing amazing. And that was the best thing I ever did because I just started to learn, how to do plug in a microphone, how to get a level, just the most basic thing.
Yeah.
And I remember when I did a session for $100, I was like, wow, I could really, I should do this.
$200.
Yeah, I could do more and make a few hundred.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really, I don't know about your approach. It wasn't until recently when I made a couple big leaps in my rig. But before then, I was just like, okay, if I can grind out some money, then I'll buy another mic. Okay, if I could grind out a little more, let's just try to, whenever I could, reinvest.
Yeah.
And I think, people see someone like your setup or maybe even mine or some of our peers, if kids are out there and they go, oh man, they have all this insane shit. Like, I don't have enough bread for that. Like, it's just about getting started.
Sure.
Yeah. And I went the slow way. Like, I think it was good. I learned how to get better at what I was doing instead of just like I did my first car I drove wasn't a Ferrari, it's like that whole thing.
Right. I mean, that's really what I try to preach about all this is like the minimal miking thing is just, it's like, that's why you played Little League on a small field at first, you don't have, it's just like, you
got to learn how to use the fundamentals.
Yeah, you don't go listen to Alan Holdsworth when you want to become a guitar player. You start with like,
Black Berry.
There's a reason. Yeah.
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 Yeah, totally.
Yeah. What I'm kind of curious about, like, you got into like the drum. I'm kind of like shifting gears, but I think we'll come back. The restoring drums and like the sonic part of that and how that's maybe influenced like your drum choices and things like that. So I'm like gonna dive in deep. Like,
yeah.
It kind of I find that interesting.
Yeah, I like to restore drums. I imagine I'll do more of it when I get older. Like, tinkering in my garage. Mm-hmm. I was heavy into it for a few years.
Yeah.
And I did learn a lot about what makes different drums do what they do and how to do certain things, how to wrap a drum kit, how to plug holes, how to, all those things. But I also realized what an incredible time suck it is. Like I flipped a number of kits and then, stuff like that. I'm sure it's the same for dudes who like restore old cars. Like if you start adding up the hours, then you'll be like, what? Why the hell am I doing this?
Yeah.
I made like $1 an hour.
Right.
But I did, I don't know how it influenced my drum choices so much as I just gain it. Like when I get a kit, I know kind of what I could do. I know what the edge of my abilities are. Like I don't have because my garage is all drums and studio. I don't have like heavy woodworking equipment. So like I take my drums to Chris Ewer or Bill Dedamore when I need edges.
Yeah.
Like I don't do that. Okay. I'd like to learn someday.
Right.
But I know how to wrap a drum set and, I cleaning stuff and the normal stuff.
So maybe it's not a huge like thing that you.
I'll restore a kit when I come across one these days. But it used to be, I think there's a lot of dudes that's their hustle. It's like finding old gear and flipping it.
Right.
And it's harder and harder to find. Like I used to just stumble across old Ludwig kits for a few $100 and be like, this is like really funky, but I could clean it up and play it or sell it.
Right.
And now it's too hard to find. It's all about like, if one falls in my lap, I might, but I don't seek it out because it's not the best use of my time.
Yeah.
That's where I ended up.
Yeah, the whole camp. I mean, do you feel like the kits that you own now are like the dopest kits for the thing that you do?
Well, I think I wonder if you'll agree with this, Blair. I was thinking about this recently. You'll play something for a while, and it'll be like your thing, and then nothing's wrong with it, but maybe you change or you burn out on it.
Yeah.
So there's a natural cycle to stuff, but I find like I've settled on a few things that, like you have, I'm sure. You know what they do.
Yeah. You
can do your thing with them. You know what you can get out of them. They cover the bases you need to cover. So they check like certain boxes. And if I have too much stuff that's redundant, that's when I get rid of it. Like I don't need two 60s Ludwig kits that are the exact same sizes.
Right.
Like as much as I'd love to have 4 or 5 of them in different finishes.
They all look cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got so I could tell you what I have. I could be specific. Like
sure.
I have. My main recording kits are a Ludwig standard that I had Chris do the edges on. That's really fat. Now, one thing about those drums that you may know or not that I didn't know is, so they're late 60s, early 70s, and they have mahogany.
Yes.
Mahogany on inside and outside.
Yep.
It's almost like a WFL shell or an older version. It's not the maple poplar maple.
Right.
So they're very warm. And then I have a Camco kit that's a brighter but really cool.
Okay.
And then I just got this. Well, you can sort of see it. I have a Gretsch kit that I just got.
Yep.
I've kind of flowed through a few 80s Gretsch kits, and I recently just sold two to buy the one that I just was trying to buy off of a dude for a while. That's so killer.
Didn't you have a white one?
I did, but I only had it shortly, and it was great.
Okay.
But this other kit, long story. I was trying to buy a kit off a guy, and he was like kind of on the fence. And he's like, and I was like, well, let me know if you ever want to sell it. It was kind of expensive because it's a big kit and it was really mint. Well, I kind of gave up on it, and I bought that white kit that you mentioned. And then like 2 weeks later, he's like, hey, I'm going to sell that kit. If you want it, let me know. And I was like, I'm getting it.
Okay.
So I put up the white kit for a really reasonable price on my Instagram, and I sold it in like a couple hours to a buddy in LA.
Okay.
And I sold a little Bop Gretsch kit that was awesome that I wasn't playing. So I basically, you know how it is.
Yeah.
Like if you're if you need drums, sometimes it makes sense just to flip some other drums and get the new one you want. Get rid of the ones that you're not using as much. Right. You know, I did that with my snares. I had way too many for a while, so I've kind of pared that down too. Because of course, like I still have like 20 something snares, but I end up using the same 5 or 6.
Right.
Whatever that rule is, it always like, okay, I've got the freaking this Ludwig and that Ludwig and this wood drum, and there's a few things. It's like, and you go, oh yeah, I don't play that one ever, but maybe I will.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, I didn't know if that was going to tie in at all. That whole rabbit.
Yeah, well, if I find like I restored a Rogers kit, that I found, it fell on my lap.
Yeah.
And I just put a bunch of work into it, made it look awesome, and I sold it. I sold it to a buddy who has a studio. But I put it in my studio, and I was like, this is a great kit. But I like the way my Ludwig sound in my room.
Yeah.
Better.
Yeah.
Like, as you know, like I think a lot of this, which this ties back into this whole recording thing, is because I was thinking about like, well, what are we going to talk about with Blair? We'll talk about whatever. But I really think that a lot of this thing, when you're doing your space, it's just about knowing your space. And you'll know after a while what works in there. I'm not saying don't experiment, because you got to experiment to get there, but you'll find like it's cool to keep trying different things. I see guys who just go to the ends of the earth, constantly trying different shit in their room. You may be one of those dudes, but you also know that when you're at the point now where you know your room so well, you know what you can get out of it.
Yeah.
And like you might put a kid in there, it might sound good on a gig or in another room. You might not like it in your room. Or mics. So I try not to be interrupt, but I also am very aware of like, okay, does this work in my space? My room has a sound.
Did you so you had this built originally as like a practice space, and as you got into recording 2013, did you start to treat the room differently, or was it kind of
it's funny
with what
the guy that built the room is a serious tweaker. He like tunes people's mixing and mastering rooms and tracking rooms.
Oh, okay.
And he built me sound treatment that he installed. So I added too much junk like on the walls, like this CD diffusion. So I had to move some of the panels around. But I mean, it works. Like one thing I have, maybe you can sort of see, I have some diffusion on the ceilings.
Okay. Yeah, I can see the edge of it.
Yeah, so which are great because I can put any mics up and I'm not getting a bunch of weird stuff up there, but it still has enough liveliness to it.
What do you feel like your room is like really great at?
Tight and fat.
Okay.
It's just like, so there isn't much weird stuff for me to deal with. It's pretty even sounding, but it's tight. And that may also have something to do with the fact that it's full of shit too.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I got all my drum kits out of here and had some more wall exposed, probably be a little snappier. But I've had people tell me, the room sounds good. And I think sometimes I wish I had a bigger room, like higher ceilings and just a bigger room. But I think, well, honestly, most of the time I'd probably be trying to counteract that. I'd be putting a gobo up or, And I think with the tools we have now, and I don't know which ones you use, but I'm sure you use some of the same ones. Like, it's easier to approximate a bigger space, I think, than it would be to spend a lot of effort fighting to make a big place sound tighter when that's what you want.
Yeah, it's easier to get bigger than to get smaller.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Are you doing stuff for Lyle in your room?
A lot, yeah. Not any in the past couple months, but over the pandemic and before then, I've done a lot for Lyle.
So as opposed to going to his place, you're
yeah. So Lyle is one of the most.
So just so people know, we're talking about Lyle Workman.
Yeah, he's a great composer, guitar player. He's got a record out. I'm not on it, but it's like Vinny's on it, and it's just incredibly inventive guitar player composer. Lyle has a great home studio with his own drum room, and he has good gear, and he knows what he's doing with it, and he gets really good sounds. And I would go there quite a bit.
Okay.
And then there was a couple times when he was in a pinch, and he said, and this is a couple years back, "Hey, could you do something from home for me?" And I did. And then the next time I had to do something for him, I was like, "Was that cool?" He's like, "Yeah, but I want you to come to my place." Mm-hmm. Like, he was diplomatic about it, but I think he was, basically saying, like, I like my sound.
Yep.
I like what I'm getting. I want you to come here.
Yep.
So I did that for a while. And another time, and as Lyle's one of these guys that's working at such a level that he's made me get better.
Yeah.
Like I for instance, I was on an older version of Pro Tools. He'd send me a session from a score. And when you open up a newer version of Pro Tools than the older version, you get all this weird stuff happening.
Yeah.
And then he was having to sort of help me do surgery to make it work. And I thought, if I want to work with people who are doing at the highest level, I need to get my shit better.
Yeah.
And how everything is connected, Blair. Like, the version of Pro Tools you run, the version of Pro Tools I was running at the time, I couldn't get higher on the type of Mac I was on.
Right.
It was that old.
Yeah.
And then if I wanted to...
I've been in that road, yeah.
So within the last year and a half or so, I made a major leap. I made a couple leaps before then, but then I got a new interface, computer, and software.
Yep.
Just like, okay, bring it into the now. Then I'll lock this down for a few years. I'll worry about the next thing in a few years.
Yep.
But yeah, as far as Lyle goes, to finish that little thought, a couple, few months down the road, another year later, I recently did, over the pandemic, I did stuff for him. He's like, "Wow, your stuff is like really great. It's as good as mine or better." And he really likes his sound. So if I'm making him happy, I think getting a better interface was a big deal because I was on the older Apollo. I'm Apollo based.
I think we texted about this. What did you?
Yeah.
You got an Apollo?
I went to the new Apollo. The new the X series.
Yeah. I have a 16X. Is that what you got?
Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah.
Because like you, I have enough outboard pre's that are great. I don't need one of those built-in pre's. I wasn't using them anyways on my older one.
Right.
Yeah.
So what kind of things, what sonically, well, two questions.
Yeah.
What, do you think you were trying to emulate some of the things that you knew Lyle liked, or do you think you just got better at doing
Not at all. I was never thinking about Lyle's rig. Just how can I make I'm sure you think this way too. It's like, it's this money's hard fought for when we're trying to do sessions and gigs.
Yeah.
Where is the smartest place next? If I'm going to put money into my recording rig, you're kind of always thinking like, well, where does it make sense to get better? So, it was like, it's usually mics or pre's. If you're at a place now with your, converter and your computer and all that.
Yeah.
So no, it was about, because I have other clients than Lyle, but I knew that if I get my shit where I'm really happy with it, other people I work with are going to be thrilled. So I made a couple big leaps in recent times where I was like, I actually sold quite a bit of drums.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm going to get some stuff that is the best that I could think of, that I've used, that I know I'm not going to outgrow. I'm no more intermediate steps. If I'm not going to get something that's keeper stuff, I'm just going to wait till I can afford.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot, and I don't mean to say this, like I would give the opposite advice to a kid starting out. I'd say get the best stuff you can afford. Find some used stuff. Yeah, be humble. But yeah, we're trying to sell our services to people who are working in the best studios. They have access to the best gear, so it's got to hang.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an
And
interesting catch 22 because I used to I never know whether I'm repeating myself on this thing or not, but like I used to tell people like save your money. Don't buy a lot, but buy really good shit.
That's great advice.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I also think it's come to this point where software is amazing, and if you get the Apollo system and you can have Neves and APIs and you're going through those using the console, you know, my philosophy had to change and say like, okay, well, if that's a great way for you to get in and you have those options, and I know that the UA stuff is super solid, then okay, I sound like an old dinosaur if I just preach the same thing. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, I know there's a drummer who I haven't met in person yet, but we become friendly on online. This guy in New York named Jordan Rose. If you've seen him play, he's real funky pocket.
Okay.
And his shit sounds great. And I was like, what are you using? Like, what's your, how do you, and he's all into the Apollo. He might have some pre's now, but he was using all like Neve stuff. And he's like, the dude has a great touch. He's got a great old Ludwig kit. He's miking intelligently, getting good levels. Like 99% of the people aren't going to know, especially not through your phone.
Right.
But yeah, I'm talking, you know how it is, Blair. Every percent, whatever is that law, when you're trying to get to that last, squeeze that last 5-10%, whatever that is, becomes like exponentially more expensive and difficult.
Right.
So, it's like, well, where does it stop making sense? Where does it make sense?
Yeah.
But I bought some killer pre's in the last year or so that I know I'm going to have.
Yeah.
And it's like an investment. And I'm not going to be like, oh, I should have got the such and such. Now I got to try to sell those. And
yeah. And then they're not worth as much. And
because you bought like middle grade stuff or prosumer stuff. Yeah.
One thing that you turned my brain onto a few years ago was sending things at Unity for mix. That's your general philosophy, right? So when somebody pulls up all your tracks, they can just hit Unity and that's your mix, right?
Boy, I was talking some good shit back then, Blair. I doubt I do that, but I'm more I think that I probably had that in my ear, but I don't know if I do that. I try.
You're so busted, dude.
I know I'm so busted. I talk a good game, man. Take everything I said with a grain of salt, and this is probably all bullshit too.
No, but it was really. I was kind of like, oh, maybe I should be doing that.
Well, that's like the Al Schmidt thing or something, like just If you just go like this, there's your record. Like they do a whole band like that. Yeah. I'm more concerned now because I keep changing like a mic or a drum with just looking like I can see my rig. I can see my Pro Tools. Just being like, it's a constant battle with myself to just stay in the safe zone with my gains. Just there's nothing to be gained, no pun intended, by hitting digital stuff too hot.
Right.
So I see like I have to back off stuff, regularly, or just, you might have your gain set and then you're playing harder. You get excited on the next song. It's a different energy. And then you're going back, okay, and that's what I like about having my knobs right here. Cause I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'll pull back my overheads a couple dBs and yeah.
The thing that I loved about like whatever that text exchange was, is that it made me think about like who is the client that I'm sending to.
Sure.
And is this person going to be able to emulate what I'm sending them? So I'm that our conversation about that made me think like, okay, if somebody I'm working with is maybe
less savvy,
then I'm going to send them stuff at Unity. So, it may be that my overhead waveforms look like almost non-visible, but if they pulled it up and
it's a balance that you chose.
Yeah, it's gonna sound like it like hey, do you like this? Yes, that sounds great. Send me the stems. Great. All you got to do is set them at 0, and you don't have to worry about mixing the drums because of your budget or experience or whatever.
So one thing I want to talk to you about, Blair, because it was interesting because I've come, I think when I first started recording, I had this very naive idea of like and I talked to you about it, and you were very politely disagreeing with me. But I was like, well, yeah, I should know, because you were diplomatic, because you're that kind of a guy. But I was saying, like, well, I'm just sending my stuff dry, like as if that was a purist kind of thing. Whatever I meant by dry, meaning like no EQ. I mean, I didn't even fucking have any EQs on my pre's, so it's like, of course I said that. And I wasn't thinking, but I was at the time. I thought, well, I don't want to make I don't want to make production decisions. Like, I'll give them I'll make it sound as good as I can at a safe level, and I'll let them tweak. Now, that's still true. They're going to tweak no matter what.
Right.
But playing drums, tracking for someone is production. You know, every choice you're making is a production decision.
Yeah. So,
and you were like, well, I use EQ. And I'm thinking like, wow, that's interesting. So, I've gotten now where, of course, but what I want to ask you, beyond just EQing stuff, because you do so many great sounding things where you're doing more extreme stuff. I'll just, not down the middle, just a microphone on a drum, where you're making like, you got a mic that you're processing pretty hard, or just the way you've mic'd it is a kind of a strong choice. What I want to ask you is, are you checking in with clients? Are you, when someone sends you, like, let's say someone sends you a pop song and you want to really crunch it up with your snare sound, or are you checking with them, or do you just sometimes just roll the dice and send it to them? Or are you sending them stuff that those more strong choices are an option? It's a mic or two that they don't have to go with, that their clean thing is still there. This is what I want to know from you, because I don't usually do that, but I'm wondering, because I see you make these really strong choices. I'm wondering how that works.
The answer is all of the above.
Okay.
I definitely try to communicate as much as I can. What are we doing? Is there a reference? Just like we all do.
Yeah.
And then, yes, I think my goal is to give them something that is whether it's unique or decisive, and hopefully sets the production in a certain way, especially if I'm first, right? Like, because that's the really crazy, tricky, weird thing about home studio recording, where you're by yourself. You're like, I'm setting your whole thing in motion. Like, the choices that I'm making right now are helping define your song big time. So, so do I want to do that? I mean, yeah, I want to do that, right? That's our goal as an artist, right? It's like, totally. So yeah, I'm checking in with them. But then, of course, like, if I'm making a reverb choice or a distortion choice or something like that, I try to give it as an option. So it's like, if it's too much, cool.
So when you say you give it as an option, you're working in Pro Tools?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you saying that you're giving it to them as an extra mic, or are you saying you're doing it as a plugin that they can disengage or engage, or both?
Both.
That's if they're on Pro Tools. If they're not, I guess if someone wasn't on Pro Tools, Blair, let's say you got a producer who's on Logic, you're sending them a pop song.
Yeah.
And you got a gnarly processed mic.
Yeah.
But you're not sure, because they're in Bulgaria. You haven't been able to talk to them. So,
I assume works in Bulgaria, but maybe you need to upgrade. I don't know.
Is there a chance? Would you ever, to be safe, do it as a plugin and then print them you're treated? Or is it more like, here's an extra? Is it easier just to say, here's some channels, use them or lose them?
I think like this. That particular mic, I will plug in it, do whatever. I will print it.
Yep.
So it's committed. Like that. Yep. Here's the choice I made. Like, I've checked in with you. Presumably you agree with it. Sure. I don't know what's going to happen when it goes to mixing, but if you don't like it, you have the option to mute it, and then you have
enough other shit that you can cover your
clean tones that are good enough.
Yeah.
And you get to do your own thing. Or I'll do it through busing. I'll send the mics. I'll send the mics, the room mics through a little parallel compress thing, smash the shit out of them,
and print that.
and print that, but you still have the option of some fairly normal remotes.
Yeah, that's smart.
Or if there's a delay, whatever. I give them the option to mute.
Have you been using Listen to audio movers?
Yes, here and there.
Yeah. Have you talked about that before on your podcast?
I've definitely had conversations. I don't know if it's through this, or not.
Yeah. So I'm just going to put it out there for the couple random people who are listening to us yak.
Yes.
There's three or the zillions. One thing that has helped me out a lot with some clients who really want to be producing you is the audio movers app, because instead of printing bounces and sending them and they're downloading them or streaming them, it's a plugin that sits on your DAW that there's a receiver and a transmitter. And there's like not very much latency, and they can hear your 2 mix exactly. Yeah. And they can, I've worked with people where I'm like, I'm going to lay some down. I made a strong choice with the snare drum. Yeah. I'm going to record 2 and you tell me. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, I like that second snare. I'm like, cool. Yeah. And I find like if I could spend 10 minutes doing that versus a revision, playing the whole song, like I don't want to burn through a bunch of tracks and then have to do revisions. Yeah. So that's it. That's where I like it.
Where it's really come in handy for me is part choices. There's some composers I work with, and then during the pandemic, they do a lot of TV stuff, and they really wanted like a bandy type feel for like a theme they were working on. So it was really like that thing of like, hey, let's try kick drum patterns. I'm going to send it on the other end, and obviously, if you're sending MP3s, that is just mind numbing, right? So audio movers for me has been super useful on like,
because you can just playlist and go, okay, let me show you option B, option C.
Yeah, or not even playlist, like live in the room, like just
while they're playing. Yeah. Even better. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's the kick drum pattern. Great. Can you try an offbeat hi-hat bang? Just like you would in a real studio.
Yes.
Like that human interaction where decisions are literally made within seconds. Like, nope, that sucks. Sorry about that idea. Let's next. Like, that could take 15 minutes for one decision. So that's where I really have found it helpful. And the sonic thing, too, not as much, but that's where I really love that.
Yeah, the whole thing. Just give me your opinion and save us all time. Yeah. Because that's the disadvantage about this way that we do this work. We're isolated, and how do we bridge that gap? That's a great tool.
How often are you having people over? Let's pretend COVID's not a thing, and
hardly ever.
Yeah,
hardly ever. Okay. I don't have a space like you. Well, I don't know. Your space, you have a control room, so you can be in there and produce. I've noticed you've hosted other drummers who maybe don't have their own room, which is cool.
Which I love.
I've done that a little bit. I've had people over here, but most of my clients are, I have one engineer that loves to engineer me. So he'll actually be sitting right next to me.
Okay.
And he wants to tweak.
Cool.
And he produces me while I work. And that's totally cool.
Yeah.
I'm willing to do it. But I think most people, especially busy people, they love having a guy like you or me or whoever that they trust.
Yep.
To be able to, hey, could you work on this thing? And they're at their place working on something else.
Yeah.
Instead of like, you're there and they're producing you, then they stop what they're doing. And if they trust you, you know what they want. I think it's the efficiency is what a big part of the appeal is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The busier composers and stuff. But maybe not as much as you. But I've had people over here. I recorded a acoustic guitar record for this duo, and I was like, that was a whole like learning how to mic a guitar.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep. I recorded George Deering one time in my studio.
Oh wow!
And I was like sweating.
How great,
man!
Yeah.
The composer was like, "Hey man, can George come over tomorrow for like 3 hours or whatever?" I was like, "Wait, are you serious?" And I was up here. I was in my room for like 4 hours. Like
you're like Googling like how to record acoustic guitar.
I just wanted to make sure everything was like ready to go because I was just like, there's no way I'm gonna make that dude wait around. You know what I mean?
So did you end up doing just like a couple close mics and maybe some room mics, or what did you do?
I think I did a pair of 414s, and then we also did electric, and he literally brought his pod, and it was amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I just wanted to make sure there was no hum, there was no bullshit that was gonna, you know what I mean? Just like, have you worked with George?
I think I've been on something that he's on, but not at the same time.
Okay, I mean he's like,
legendary studio guy.
Yeah,
he's
George
like
has played on everything since
every movie.
And he's the kindest.
They usually are the people that are that good.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure it went.
How cool.
But I really love having. I mean, here's the thing. One of the things I wanted to ask you. You got to record early in the '90s. Like you were recording in real studios in LA before I was. You know what I mean?
A little bit, yeah. I had
You got to experience that young, man, and like
a little bit.
And see how sessions work and things like that. And I love. I mean, I crave that thing.
I recently had a session for the first time in person in LA at a studio, and it was like, whoa, we're all here. And what blew me away was the players were all killer. It was like Dave Levita and Babco and Dan Lutz.
Hacks.
Like how efficient sessions are when, I mean, you just do it now because they're gonna do it great.
Yeah.
You be great, and then we'll be out of here before lunch. We'll get these songs done.
Yeah.
Like I think I get into the rhythm of taking advantage of the time we have when we're working at home, which is one thing that's so great about this. It's like, maybe I could change my cymbals or change my snare. Like really put some time into it that you would never do if you're in a room with all these people and the clock is ticking for everyone. Most people aren't making records in person like that. That's pandemic notwithstanding.
Yes.
You get people together and they're all really good. You figure out what you're doing, you do it.
Yeah.
You might go, try it. The producer might say, throw up a different snare.
Yep.
That's the most you hear. Or the tom's ringing too much. Put some gaff on it or something.
Right.
So
it's funny.
I've been so used to this rhythm that I went in and I was like, it was like I was having so much fun. It was over before I knew it.
It's funny. I was having I'm not trying to name drop, but
go ahead.
I had coffee with Abe recently, and we were
Love
just
Abe.
talking about
what a guy.
Yeah, Abe's amazing, right? And I was just talking about like one of the strange things for me is exactly what you said is like I'm so used to this rhythm, and if I screw up something, especially if it's like something like a TV commercial where it's weird, there's like a bar of 5 just out of nowhere or something like that.
You got to hit some weird thing that would you never do that in a song, but you're hitting a mark or something.
Yeah, and at home, you have the option of screwing up a few times.
Yeah.
But when you get in a room with people again, that option goes out the window. And I was saying like, man, one of my battles is like that mentality of like being on your fucking game, like no matter what.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
and keeping connected to that, even though, and not just taking advantage of the fact that you're in your studio.
Yeah.
Trying to keep your red light game face on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's definitely something to that because that's when you can really throw down some of your best work, when you really are demanding it of yourself.
Yes. And I try to keep that, but it's hard when you're by yourself.
It's a different energy too. It's we go into these spaces and so I mean it's the same place and sometimes it's hard to be in there a lot. It isn't, the inspiration is different. So how do you psych yourself into that? Hopefully you have something great to play on, but you don't always. Sometimes it's just something you got to get done.
Yeah or that's the other thing, or if there's something where maybe it's not that great, but you gotta psych yourself up to be like, okay, I'm not in the room with other people. I want to be efficient yet really good, but I gotta find a way to keep that intensity and that focus.
I think, dude, and there's, but I also think the nature of what we're doing here demands a different mind state because we're playing along to existing music tracks that are in various states of definition. So we are making ourselves into the shape of a puzzle piece that fits in. And that means learning the movement, like almost like a tempo map. Things are not always perfectly gridded and edited. Where people made certain choices on the other instruments that we got to catch. And that's the way it's going to be, because let's just say this is the version. Like sometimes I've replaced drums.
Right.
I'm sure you have on records where they tracked with somebody and they did a bunch of work and then they realized like, oh, we didn't really love the sound we got, or the song has just evolved. It wasn't the drummer didn't do a good job. They realized that the vibe has changed.
Right.
So now you're going in, and I think that's a very different skill set actually, Blair, than hey, let's all play the song together because we're all feeling it together at the same time, versus what is here that's already defined, and how do I make that feel like we all did it together? I think that's a trick. I think that's what makes people good at this thing or not, is trying to make these existing tracks feel like it isn't a bunch of guys overdubbing.
Right.
So I agree with what you're saying, but I also think that this sort of more analytical, take your time approach is actually what most of the stuff I do from home demands.
Right.
Like I just did a track yesterday for a friend, great bass player, Kevin McCormick. He's a producer, great bass player. He's working on a track for somebody. It's on a grid, but I don't know who recorded all the tracks. His bass is on it. It's great. But I felt there was, there's a movement. Nothing egregious. But when I went in and looked at what I was doing, I thought, should I edit this a little bit? And I'm like, let me just see. I'm a little ahead here. That snare's a little behind. I move some stuff around. I'm like, doesn't feel as good. Whatever I did, like on the third take, was feeling pretty natural. And it isn't about like grid perfection, because they weren't. And I don't have their multis. I have a bounce down. I can't see, but I'm pretty sure like, they were pushing ahead and then laying back.
It's interesting. Right. So one of the things the luxury I allow myself with sometimes is to play a tune a bunch of times, because I like to get full takes.
Yes,
I like that mentality. Yes. I like the energy that builds, and hopefully a part that builds and things like that. But I'll allow myself to play a tune a number of times before I even hit record, because I know that like I know myself, right? I know that like probably second take's not going to be it. It may be technically right.
Yep.
But like, hopefully, there's an emotion in there that I'm going to finally connect with, or something where it, like exactly what you just said. Now it sounds like music. So I will allow myself that thing.
Yes.
And then sometimes,
because you're internalizing the track too, Blair.
Exactly.
You're becoming like really attuned to it in ways that you don't even know.
Yeah.
It isn't just like, oh, they went ahead here. It's just like you start to feel the track.
Yes.
And that's when you get into that really good space with it.
And that's that thing where you're in the room with people, you're humming with them.
All together.
And everybody, you kind of know when you're about to get the take before you start the take. Whether you just finished one and the producer goes, that was great, we're doing one more. And
because you're locked in then.
Everybody goes, we're going to fucking nail it this time.
Yep.
Or there's the other thing where like you're like, that was it for me. But then somebody goes, can we do one more? You go, okay.
Yeah, I know I can do that again.
I'm going to do it again, because we're in a collective headspace.
Yeah.
It's trying to capture all those things yet by yourself. It's
like
those different mentalities happening, sitting by ourselves. Yeah. Are we done?
No, I totally agree with you. Yeah, this thing it's its own thing. Yeah. I think it's a lot of the same skills as playing together, but a really different skill set too at the same time.
Yeah.
For exactly the reasons you're saying. Like, it takes a while to learn the track, internalize it. When you're doing it all together at the same time, you're all on the same page from the get-go, in theory.
Yeah.
So what, you're really good at something that I'm terrible at. Which is, I know you've made a course, you've got, you've been doing like a Patreon, you post a lot of your playing. I have a hard enough time just getting in here and getting my shit working and getting the stuff done before I got to go get the kids from school or make dinner.
No, you don't. No,
I have a hard time doing that. How do you record yourself? Like when you're filming, are you using, I actually want to know how you do it. Are you using GoPros? I know you got a couple cameras. what's your process for making your content, if you don't mind?
Are we talking about a course, or are we talking about
No, just anytime you share some of your playing. I notice you often have a couple camera angles, not always, but and then like
yeah, okay.
I can't get my videos to ever sync up perfectly with the frame rate of Pro Tools. Like there's drift.
Sure.
This shit drives me crazy. I'm just like makes me want to not do it.
That's an iPhone thing, by the way.
I know. I shouldn't use them.
It's also a Final Cut thing. If you get Final Cut, not iMovie, that will fix that.
I've been using DaVinci Resolve, and it does help a lot.
Okay.
My movie's terrible.
iMovie's
But
terrible.
I think the iPhone is super bad for this, for audio sync.
I mean, how do I answer this?
I mean, when you record yourself, are you taking out? How does it work? Are you taking out 3 memory cards and putting it into?
I mean, it depends on what I'm doing. If it's just like some, Instagram, I'm trying to be relevant thing, I just literally throw my iPhone up and just pick a take. It may not be the take. Just go, okay, this is a sound I got today. Blah,
Okay,
blah.
but when I see you, I've seen you on Instagram have more than one camera.
Sure.
Are those GoPros?
One is a GoPro and one's an iPhone.
And then you put them. How do you get the stuff off of it?
I put it into Final Cut.
Okay.
and then Final Cut will line it up.
Yep.
And then you do an edit. You just play and you just edit back and forth between whichever camera angle you want.
Well, you're good at it, Blair.
Oh, thanks.
Good work, man.
I mean, a lot of that was from Patreon, which I've slowed down on because I decided
you made a course.
I've kind of making courses, but just trying to make it, I guess, interesting. And I got to say, it's funny because to look back at some of my stuff with a little bit of perspective now, because I think some of the production really sucks. But I think the content itself is good. So I feel okay about it. But obviously, production wise, I'm like, Jesus, that's terrible. But I don't know.
I think this is a very different. I think it's really important. Like, it's one thing that, I don't think it comes naturally for our generation. The kids who came after us, they grew up online.
Yeah.
The internet came to being while we were adults.
Dude, I'm 28. I don't know what.
Yeah, right. And I think that it's not something that it's easy for our people of our generation, Gen Xers or above, to embrace and be good at. And you're good at it. It's not natural. I think there's a different mindset.
It's funny because I don't feel good at it. I don't feel like I'm good at it, but I felt like at a certain point, and I think it was probably a similar thing to you, where I was like, I want to spend more time at home. I have kids.
Yep.
I gotta somehow stay relevant and I remember watching certain people maybe around 2011 or something, and they're starting to make videos, and I was like, I don't want to make videos. Like, I don't want to do this. But I was like, I got to do this.
Because you could see that's where it was going.
Yeah, and I talked to Tim Pierce a bunch, and Tim.
Oh, he's really good. Yeah,
Tim's great, and he's like, yeah, man, you got to do this, and I was like, okay. So it was like forced in a certain way, but I was like, man, if I'm gonna try to live at home and raise my kids, and we talked about this. I was like, I got to try to figure out how to do this somehow. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And for like the longest time, it was iMovie and just finagling shit, blah, blah, blah. And then the first course I put out, which is the recording thing, was really just like old Patreon
clips, of course, lessons.
Lessons. Yeah. And I thought when the pandemic hit, I started to get a lot of phone calls like, hey, dude, I'm off the road, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, why don't I put this out? And the production on that is pretty lo-fi. So another one I just made, I was like, okay, I got to step this up a little. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I bought Final Cut, and I was like, I gotta step it up. And now I feel like I know a little better. I'm gonna make another one now, and I'm like, okay. I painted my room so it looks a little better. People talk to me about lighting, and I'm not going crazy with lighting, but I'm like a little more aware.
Yeah. It's a visual medium.
It's just all this shit that like I can't imagine ever having thought about. But I just felt like I needed to like dive in, just like I did with recording, just like I did with drumming, like we all did. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's really smart, and I respect you for doing that. And people, as little as I do it, because I'm very negligent, it always seems to bear fruit of some kind. And I feel mixed about it, clearly, but because I'm just not that like just about posting any playing. I'm just not that great at getting around to it, but it does help people. That's your calling card now. There's no one's looking in the local 47 musician directory.
Here's a connection.
Yeah, right. Yeah, people look you up. And they go, "What's he doing?" And they look at me and they go, "This guy is weird. He's got a mullet on, and he's talking a lot of shit. I should hire him." No, I actually don't know. So I realized after I was doing a bunch of that, I'm like, I got to post some more playing so people remember that I'm a drummer.
Well, whatever, that's the balance. I love that shit. I think most of us do.
Don't encourage me, Blair. Don't encourage me.
I like it.
Thank you. Because then you don't have to talk shit and I can do it all. I get it.
Hey, man. We all gotta pick a lane.
I'll tell you what. I'll shoot a promo for this.
Okay.
Promise.
Okay.
That'll get the mullet. I got to dust the mullet off.
There we go.
So one of my kids, my younger daughter's into cosplay.
Okay.
And she was like, your mullet, your wig is really ratty. Can I brush it out? So she's like, my wig tech.
I fucking love that, dude.
If anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, check my Instagram at Calire Theory. On Instagram, you'll be entertained or appalled.
Does that guy have a name?
No, people ask me that. It's just alter ego.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. He should. Yeah, I don't know.
I have stepped up my production.
No.
If I put as much production work into my drumming videos I did into those, I'd probably be fine, huh, Blair?
You'd probably be working a lot more, yeah.
Dude, what's funny is like every time I do one of those, I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm like rewatching YouTube tutorials because like when I have two of myself, I'm like how to clone yourself in the program I'm in, and I watch the tutorial again. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, I got to do that. Like I'm just terrible at it. It's just funny because the comments are like, "You are so good at this video shit, man. You're like a genius." I'm like, "You have no idea what a moron I am. I'm terrible."
I love
here like poking on my YouTube.
Has devolved into this. I love it. I love it.
But you are good at this shit, and I respect that a lot because, we're isolated tinkering on our own. So how do you let people know what you're doing? You gotta let people into the world a bit.
We're dads, man.
Yeah.
We're dads. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And we both wear flannel. We have affinity for flannel.
We were both huge in the 90s.
Well, you were huge in the 90s.
You were doing some huge shit in the 90s. Don't get out of here. You were early 2000s.
Yeah, we're there. Yeah. I'm a late bloomer, man.
Well, dude, it was fun doing this. Anything else you want to? I don't know.
No, I feel like we've sufficiently numbed people's brains, and we did a good job at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to come over sometime, man, and see your spot. It's been way too long, and if you're ever up my way, look me up.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. All right, Mario.
Cool,
thanks,
Blair.
dude.
Good talking to you, man. Have a great day.
All right, you too.
Take care. See ya.